Hi friends, and welcome to another episode of Cooking with Colbath. My name is Julie Colbath. I'm the coordinator of Civic Engagement in the Office of Student Life here at UM-Dearborn. I realize that this is our 20th episode, which is pretty crazy. So feel free, if this is your first time tuning in, whether that's live or after the fact, there should be a playlist that has all of the past episodes, so feel free to sort through those if you need inspiration of things to cook that can commonly be found in your pantry. Today we're going to make meatball subs. Shout out to Caitlin Parker, who is the fraternity and sorority life coordinator in our office, for coming up with this idea. We're trying to think about how to utilize the Panera that we're still picking up. And so this seemed like a great idea, especially because at the moment we do have ground turkey in the pantry, and so it's going to be great, I think. So we're going to start off making the meatballs. So let me reorient you. Okay, cool. So the recipe that I found was pretty basic, right? Because I feel like meatball recipes can get very complicated very quickly, a lot of the time for like different spices. So this is a basic one. You can feel free to use any sort of meatball recipe that you want, right? If you have frozen meatballs, you can use that instead. If you have a go-to recipe, feel free to use that. So we're going to use a pound of ground turkey. Probably does not look the most appetizing. You can use beef, right, if you want. We're going to use some salt and some pepper. We're going to use 1 egg, which you probably can't see. We're going to use some breadcrumbs. It called for Italian breadcrumbs, and so I think that's often like normal breadcrumbs with Italian seasoning. I just have normal breadcrumbs, so I'm using just like basic plain breadcrumbs. If you want that like very Italian flavor, you can add some Italian seasoning into it. But I feel like, right, if I make a batch of meatballs, then I can use it for different things, right? So I don't necessarily want to be tied to an Italian flavor at the moment. But if you know you're going to eat it in some Italian flavors, feel free to use Italian breadcrumbs. You can also make your own breadcrumbs pretty easily if you just have some bread. You just have to dry it out in the oven, let it cool, and then smash it or put it in a blender. And then we're going to be using, I'm not even going to pick it up because you're not going to see it anyway because it's clear. It called for olive oil. I only have avocado oil at the moment, so I'm substituting that. You could also substitute canola oil, whatever oil you have. So basically, and I'm going to use my hands. I know this probably isn't something everybody would want to do. I just like the ability to have some more control in mixing it instead of using like a spoon or something. But 1 second, we're going to need to beat our eggs. I'm going to grab a fork. So we're just going to, beat the egg until the yolk integrates with the white. And it doesn't have to be like super perfect, right? It's just so that you don't get weird patches if you were to just like put it in there and it didn't mix properly. So let me put this in the sink. Okay. So we're going to take our ground turkey, or again, if you have ground beef, I'm going to take this hair tie off so it doesn't slip down. And then we're just going to mix everything in there. So I'm going to pour in the breadcrumbs. I'm going to pour in the salt and pepper. I'm going to pour in the oil. And then I'm going to pour in our beaten egg. Pepper's probably going to make me sneeze, so I apologize in advance. And then you can, again, use a spoon. I just prefer to use my hands so I can really mix it together. So you're just going to mix it so that everything's incorporated. So the turkey that we have at the pantry at the moment is frozen. So I had grabbed this from the pantry. I put it in my fridge overnight. And now today I'm easily able to mix it without any problem. If you are defrosting meat like that, you'll want to, after you've frozen something and you try to thaw it out, you'll want to use it within a few days. You can also, which is something that I have in my slow cooker at the moment, right, trying to do some meal prep for the week. You can also, and I've talked about this before, defrost your meat by putting it in a cold water bath, where you change the cold water every 30 minutes. So for example, for my pound and a half of chicken that's in my slow cooker, it took about an hour for it to defrost. They're thinner chicken cutlets, so it depends on how thick your meat is. So if you had just taken the like round tube of turkey and you threw it in a water bath, it would probably take about an hour, where you would change the water once, and then you would be good. Okay, so this seems pretty incorporated. And if you have favorite meatball recipes, please drop them. I feel like meatballs can be tricky sometimes, because sometimes they don't like hold together as well, right? You need that egg and like the breadcrumbs as binders. So what we're gonna do now, and I've full disclosure, never made this recipe before. It's from the like BuzzFeed's Tasty website. Had good reviews, so hopefully it'll be great. Okay, so I am going to put these in the sink. And then since there's a fun glare from my sliding door, I'm going to move the baking pan over to this island. And we will roll our meatballs. So this says it's going to make 15 2-inch meatballs. Conceptually, right, like 2 inches really means nothing to me in terms of meatballs. So I normally split it in like half and then split the halves in half. And so I'm probably going to make about 16 meatballs. We'll see. But you'll want to make sure that you have a cookie sheet or some sort of baking pan lined with parchment paper or foil. One trick, if you do have parchment paper, that I've found, like, you'll roll it out, you'll cut it, and then you'll put it on the pan, and then it's trying to roll back together. So I normally crumble it up and then bring it back into its full shape. So you can probably see there are some lines, and then it just stays. Okay, so I'm gonna eyeball and take about half of our meatball mixture, and then I'm gonna break it in half again. So I'm expecting to make, again, it says 15, just for simplicity's sake. I'm gonna make 16, because then I can take and half this again, right? I'm just gonna set it here because it doesn't really matter. And then I'll half it again, and then I'm able to more easily make meatballs that are probably consistent, because I feel like otherwise, if you just start pulling the meat apart, I normally get a little bit like, am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? So I think when I break it up, it's a lot easier for me. So we're gonna make these into little balls. You could also use a cookie scoop. That's probably a good way too of getting some like more consistent sized meatballs. And then you could, if you have extra, right, just add a little bit to each one. As long as the meatballs cook through, right, there might be some that are a little bit smaller, as is apparent in my little one right there. You could always pull the ones that are cooking faster off sooner. And then let the other ones cook for a little bit longer. Okay. So once we have finished, right, and this is my other half, so I'm pulling it in half. If you have a kitchen scale, which I do, at first I was like, I'm never going to use this, and then I use it all the time. It's very helpful. We have the oven set at 400, so we're going to bake these for about 15 to 20 minutes, or until you feel like it's cooked inside. And then it'll be pretty easy to formulate our meatball subs from there. We're just gonna, so for example, right, when we pick up Panera, a lot of the times we have like baguettes. We didn't get them this week, but I went to the store and got a loaf of bread. So you can use any sort of bread that you think would work, right? Like I bought an Italian loaf. If you had a baguette, that would be perfect. The recipe calls for that. Okay. But if you have like sandwich rolls or something, obviously those will work too. So we made 16 meatballs. Some of them are a little bit bigger than others, right? When you're kind of eyeballing, that's what happens. So if you want to use a cookie scoop again, I think that might work better. So I'm going to put my bowl in the sink and wash my hands quick so that I'm not touching the pan with my raw meat hands. Okay. So I'm going to move this so you can see they're pretty evenly shaped. So I'm just going to throw them in the oven. And it's set to 400. I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes. And then it'll feel like no time to y'all because it's just gonna magically, the meatballs will magically appear. So just hold on 1 second. All right, our meatballs are out of the oven. It's been about 15 minutes. I checked them at 15 minutes. And I had put a thermometer in there. If you have one, you want it to get to 165. That's the temperature that is recommended for ground turkey. But then I also cut one in half just to make sure that it had cooked through. And you can see that it did. So our next steps are I'm going to take some bread, right? And like I mentioned, you can use any kind of bread you want. If you want to use a French baguette, cool. If you have like sub rolls, also cool. I had just bought this loaf of Italian bread at the store. So I'm just gonna like toast enough bread for me right now because I'm the only one who will be eating it. But you could toast if you plan to eat this for multiple days, or if your whole family is eating it, or if you're eating it too. Feel free to do so. So I'm gonna cut some just for me for now. And then I'm gonna cut it in half. All right. And then, right, like once I put the meatballs on there, it's gonna get a little bit tall, so I'm gonna take out some of this bread just to make like little wells for the meatballs. So I'm gonna take some off the top and off the bottom. It smells very good. All right. So I'm gonna grab some oil and some garlic, granulated garlic, and some salt. And I'm just gonna drizzle. I'm gonna drizzle my bread with a little bit of oil. And then I'm gonna, so the recipe that I'll post will have like specific measurements, but because I'm only doing it for myself, I'm just gonna eyeball it. So I sprinkled some granulated garlic. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of salt. Okay. So we're gonna let this toast in the oven, just for a couple minutes. So. I'm gonna set it for 3 minutes. I don't want it to get too toasty. So meanwhile, we're gonna warm up our sauce. So this is one of the spaghetti sauces that we have at the pantry right now. So I'm just gonna put it right in my pan. And I'm gonna turn my pan on. Oh, you can barely even see my pan because of the nice glare. All right, so we just want the sauce to warm up. I'm gonna rinse my hands quick. So we want the sauce to warm up, and while it's warming, you're waiting for your meatballs to cool down. And so then, once your meatballs are cooled down a little bit, right, and your sauce is warmed, you're gonna want to just toss your meatballs right into your sauce. And then we'll spoon everything onto the toasty bread that we're gonna pull out of the oven, and we'll put some cheese on it, and then we'll put it back in the oven so that the cheese melts a little bit. And it's gonna be real tasty. If y'all have any recommendations on recipes, as always, I'm always interested to hear about recipes or like items you might want featured, right? I know sometimes, not that you've been able to go into the pantry, right, but there might be things that you're kind of like, oh, what do I do with this? So for example, we have a carton of frozen eggs, which seems kind of crazy, right? I mean, there are 18 eggs in the carton. They're all broken out of their shells, right, and mixed together. And so things that, like, for example, what do you do with that, right? Once you thaw it, it's hard to like unthaw something and then rethaw it. You know, sometimes temperatures are different. So, for example, with that, you could make a, sorry y'all, that scared me. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. You could make like a quiche, or you could use it in baking. You could use it like when you're doing French toast. I don't know how good it would be as like scrambled eggs, but right, you could also make it with that. I feel like pasta sauce sometimes can like bubble and get crazy. Okay, so I'm gonna go through off our bread. I'm gonna pull it out. This is the one I want to. Alright. So just a tiny bit toasty. You can't even see that it is toasty, but once, I don't want, like, I don't like my bread too toasted, especially we're going to put it back in when we put the cheese on. So I'm not going to throw all of my meatballs in the sauce at the moment, just because personally I'm planning to, you know, freeze some of them. So what you're going to want to do is take your meatballs and just put it, if you have a slotted spoon, that's ideal. So put it on the spoon and then put it into the sauce so that it can sit in there for a minute. So I'm just going to put 3, because that seems like what will fit on my sandwich. So again, I put it on the slotted spoon, mix it in a little bit. I'm going to grab one more meatball, slotted spoon. All right. I'm going to let that heat up for just a second. So then we'll grab some cheese. So the recipe calls for provolone. If you don't have provolone, as it's often something I don't have, you could use mozzarella. I think that would be good. I don't know if like a cheddar would be good. That doesn't seem like it would, I don't know. It might not work well. You could try. So we're gonna, you could also, if you don't have slices, I think it would be equally as fine to have like shredded provolone or mozzarella or even Parmesan, although sometimes Parmesan can melt a little bit differently than the other two. We're going to put it, the pasta sauce is boiling, but we're going to put the cheese on top of the sub bun or bread with our meatballs on it. So let's construct. Not smart, forgot that it was hot. I'm gonna do it with my left hand. Here, let me move some of this. Okay, so this is, I can't even see. Bottom, top. So I'm gonna spoon my meatballs onto my bread. See, I think 3 will fit on there just perfect. Gonna be a little bit tight. I like sauce, so I'm gonna spoon a little bit of extra sauce on there. And then I'm gonna put a slice of provolone. Sorry about this glare. Daylight savings is something. Light different amount of times. Okay, so I put it on top. I'm not gonna put the top piece on there. I'm just gonna let that toast a little bit more. Go straight in the oven. 2 to 3 minutes until the cheese melts a little bit. And then our sandwich will be done. So it doesn't take that long, right? I mean, making the meatballs does take a little bit of time, right? I was really surprised how well these held up. Sometimes when I make meatballs, they do not hold up as well. And how easy the recipe was, right? I had all of those things in my pantry. So that was nice. But you can freeze these, right? I think it's super nice to have on hand, right, when you are looking for a meal and you don't necessarily want to cook. So you could make this in like a larger batch and freeze it, and then make it into whatever you use meatballs with, right? Spaghetti meatballs, barbecue meatballs. I don't know exactly what the rules are about, like if you try to put them directly from the freezer into your slow cooker. So you might want to look that up if that's something that you are interested in, right? Sometimes I think there can be some concerns about if you like put frozen, I've seen it with like frozen chicken, if you put it in the slow cooker, right, it takes a while for it to like reach temperature, and so sometimes it ends up being in the temperature danger zone for longer than it probably should be. So you could, again, thaw that, like pull them out the night before, put them in the fridge and thaw them, or potentially if you're just making stuff on the stove, if you throw them into a sauce, the sauce will eventually heat them through. And again, if you don't want to make your own meatballs, you can use frozen meatballs in this, and it will work just the same. The cheese is so melty. So I'm going to pull it. It was in there for 2 minutes. But now we've got this melty goodness. Right, and so let me grab a plate. Okay, I'm gonna shut my oven off. I'm gonna tilt you up just a little bit. So then, right, we've got the bottom of our meatball sub, and we've got the top. And now, oh, yum. I think it's gonna be really tasty. You could, if you need more sauce, right, put some on the side and dip it. It seems like an easy thing that if you did want to, right, eat it throughout the week, if it's just you eating it, or right, you live in a smaller household that might not eat all of it at one time, you could throw all the meatballs into the sauce, throw that in the refrigerator, and then once you're ready to eat it, warm that back up, and then maybe throw your bread in the oven so that it gets toasted and feels more fresh instead of doing it right before. But that's all we've got today. Thank you for joining. Again, if you have any ideas, feel free to throw them in the chat as this is just ending the live stream, or in the comments. We do check those periodically, so we would be happy to have any suggestions on what we should make for the next episode. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.